In the previous video, we talked about how to implement this entity store. Now, this video is all about when not to use generics. Okay, there is definitely a time and a place to use generics and a time and a place definitely not to use generics. And a new developer doing a single project by himself, herself, or whatever for a company and thinking, I'm going to use generics because they're brilliant, they're this, that, and the other. And then later changes come and they've got to change the whole code. And then more changes come, they've got to change everything code. And these small tasks that your customer gives to you become these super massive things. And you end up changing every single file in every single module and so on. And you want to know that you only have to change the smallest amount of code all the time because time is money. So this video is all about when not to use generics and where to use generics only. Okay, with that said, let's jump straight in. I'm just going to stop the video here quickly. This is me editing the video. This video is 35 minutes and 59 seconds long without me adding this section right now. This video is really important for you to listen to. It can be that you spend 35 minutes now listening to this, but I'm hoping that this 35 minutes will save you 35 hours in the future. Okay, so really go and get yourself a coffee right now, go and sit down, get comfortable and just listen to the video, all right? And if you get a little bit tired, then pause it, stand up, walk around, jump up and down, do some press-ups, whatever, and sit back down and listen to it, because this will make you the difference between a okay developer and a great developer, okay? Is to understand when not to use generics and when to use generics and where the pitfalls, where the problems are going to start to come. Okay, so really, I can promise you this. I've wasted hours and days using generics when in places where you shouldn't have used it. And other senior developers or architects have said, no, you did well doing there, but it wasn't the right thing to do, okay? And so I've learned from my mistakes doing this. So there's time and place to use generics and when not to use generics, specifically when not to use associated types. So with that said, let's just continue on with David. What we're going to do, first of all, is we're going to create our a class, a struct called front-end view, okay? And we're not talking about UI kits here. We're not talking about Swift UI here. We're just not talking about HTML. We're just saying that this is our front-end view, okay? And that's all I want you to care about. And this front-end view, it has one function and it's called render, okay? And this one render function is going to send back a string, all right? And that is basically it. It's going to send back a string, rendered information, okay? It's of complete no relevance what this data is, all right? It's completely made up here, okay? So don't worry about it. The whole point is that this front-end view is the closest thing that a person is going to get to it, all right? A finger could tap on a button, something is visual. Whatever turns back here could have JavaScript in it, could have whatever in it, but ultimately when a user clicks a button, right, it's going to do an action. So let's just say within inside of this one code here, right, that a user has tapped a button and you have an event here, and we'll just call it button clicked, all right? And this function is called, all right? And this function is called, and now that function, this button click should add new entity to the list. Remember, we're staying completely abstracted. We don't care about what the entity is and so on, what the list is, how the list is implemented. We just know that on that view that was returned, some button was clicked and it was linked to this one function to call this when that one button was linked. Now we need to add this new entity to the list. Now the question is should this view know about what the entity is? No, it shouldn't. So add new DTO to the list, right? Does it know about a list? No, it shouldn't even know about a list, right? And it shouldn't about add a new, okay? It should be send this DTO up the chain. That's the only thing that this view should know. Send this DTO up to the chain, because now this view doesn't know about a list, doesn't know about an entity, doesn't know about a database. It's as dumb as possible. It just knows do this. So now we need a front-end view model. So we need something like self.viewModel, right? Add or a button clicked, like this, okay? Because the view model is the thing that's responsible for button clicked. So let's now come here and create a new Swift file, and we're going to call this front end view model. It might be a little bit silly, but it's going to become super important here. So front end view model, right? And the function that we're going to have here is button clicked. And when we come to this front end view, we're going to say that it's got a private var view model, and we're going to call it front end view, because this is called the front end view, and this is now the view model. All right, and so you can see now that everything's perfectly happy because the button up here got clicked, right? And we can just say button got clicked. Okay, so right now when we come to our main application, we can say now the view is a front end view, and that needs a view model, right? And we can say view model is equal to front end view model here, and initialize it. Yeah, it's okay, it's fine. So we need to come here, and there we go. So now we can come to this, and now we have our view, and we just need to say then view render. Okay, and when we run this code, you'd be no surprise that when it decides to run and actually do, it says exit code with 0. Let's have a look inside of it, and just to force the view from actually doing something, we'll come back to here and we'll say view button click. So this is the user did an action on the phone or websites or Mac or whatever. All right, this is the Mac handled this, UIKit handled this, or Mac OS handled this, or whatever handled this here. Okay, and so it's not really there, but the render passed this to the GPU, to the system to show, and this is the action that got happened. So now when we run this here, we'll see button got clicked, and that happened. No print statements in the view model, it happened in the view model. So we now want to add a new item to the list here. Well, should the view model know about the list? Well, really, it knew about the data, right? And so the view should, if it has the front end view knows about what the data type it has, okay, what it's got to visually show. And let's say that it wanted to show a name and an icon, right, as by default on the list. So now the view model and the view, they're bound together. So add item, we can change the name of it to, because button clicked was the thing that happened, but the view and the view model, they are living together. They know about each other. They were made for each other. So we can change it here to say add item rather than saying button clicked, because the view model needs to be that little bit more declarative about what's happening. So now we're going to say item is equal to, and we could then we're going to say here is then front end view DTO, all right, and then here it's going to be then a title, and then color is then going to be a string, right, and we're going to create our new DTO, And title is item, and then color is red here. So now we have this. Now within inside of our view model, how this DTO has been created, or what the data has been created from, is part of the view. It's of no relevance right now, but between the view model, right, and the view, they both know about each other. They both know about the DTO, right? Because we could say that the other function is get title, for example, all right, for a specific one, and this could be, for example, could have a front end DTO, and we could say that this is nil in the beginning, and when you create it, it could be nil, and then we could say like this, for example, and then it could just say item dot title, and then we could say then get color. And this is then going to return an optional string as well. And this then says the color here, like that, right? And within inside of your view, you could then say title is equal to view model get title, color is equal to view model get color, and then you could then add default colors and default whatever inside of your view, right? And when add an item, it knows that it's going to have to add a new item, and that item is going to add in the view model. It's going to get set here, then the render is going to get called or whatever, and get title and get color are going to get called once again. So we're now saying front end view DTO, and we're creating an item. Now you might think that we should set the item in the view model here, but that's not necessarily how it should work, right? Because we shouldn't be getting it from outside. We should be getting it from elsewhere. You know, where does this item come from? Well, it's going to come more than likely from a database source, or a file system, or a database, or an entity store, or it might come from a web server. It might come from absolutely anywhere. It might come from an IoT. It might come from another application on the telephone or on the Mac. It could come from absolutely anywhere. So this is where the limit of a view model, its knowledge, it's limited to this, okay? And it shouldn't really know about anything more than how to tell the view what to display, all right? And the item here is the front end DTO here is a source of truth for that one view model, and the view, let's go back here, the view's source of truth is the view model itself, right? So it's saying, hey, get me the title, get me the color, but it doesn't know where the data comes from. It just knows, ask my view model for that data and I will display it. That's all a view is supposed to do, is display it. So the view model, it has the source of truth for the front end view, right? Now, the front end view model, its source of truth is going to be a service, all right? And we're now going to say front end service. We're not going to call it a view. We're just going to say front end service. And inside of here, we then start saying front end service. And this is then going to say get item. We'll just say get default item, for example. And this is then going to be a front end DTO, and let's just say front end view DTO, and it's going to return this and say default, and then the color is going to be, I don't know, black right here. So we've got get default item here first of all, okay? And then when we go to this view model, we want to come here and say service, and then front end service here. And when we want to do the initializer, we don't want a default item here in the beginning, because we're going to have the service, and then we're going to say we're going to have the service, the item is nil. And then if next what we can do is we can turn around here and say self.item like this. Otherwise, we can say service get default item. So now we're removing the implementation from the view model itself as well. And so when we're adding an item, we are getting the default item, right, that might display on the form or something like that. So we're moving this implementation even further, and we haven't even used any protocols right now, any associated types, because views and view models predominantly are concrete types. Okay, you could add a protocol here, you could, and give that onto your view, you could, but you add in more complexity. Now there's arguments whether you should or shouldn't, but we're trying to keep it as basic as possible. So now we now want to have a function here that says add item, right? And this add item, although it might sound silly, but when we do this, we're going to say here, for example, we're going to say service add item, because that's what the whole point here of this was, right? And once we say add item, this front end view wants to know about it, right? So we're going to return this here, and it's going to be new item and 1 2 3 4 5, or it's just going to say here get default item, right? So when you add an item, it's going to say get default item. So when we come back to the view model here, we could in sense make this private, right? So nothing else knows about it, and come to the view model and say add item, right? There we go. So now we can remove this. So now we know that we are adding an item, and it's returning an item for us, and it's setting this. So self dot item is equal to item. So it knows that if it has already got one, we're now on a mutable, so we need to change this mutating. So we're now adding this to save time for later. So let's come back to our service. Now, does the service know about the data? No, that needs to go to a store, right? Because the service is just there to tell the view model what data it's got, and it could be interacting with other services within inside of the application. So services predominantly are at application level to be able to talk for views to be able to talk to each other, because nowadays you might have multiple views open, and you might have views stacked upon each other that all need the same data, but they all have their own different view models. So you've got multiple view models, but the likelihood is that all of these view models are all using one service. So this one service is for the front end feature, but there could be, say, 10 view models within inside this front end for the different views, but they're all using the same service. So it's important to know yeah. But anyway, so this is now the service. And yes, the view models could use a protocol here. So realistically speaking, we would be probably happy to say the front end service here, let's just be explicit here, protocol, and it then has a function of add item, right? And that's it. And then you could come to the view model and then say that we're going to have a service like this instead, right? And then when we come to the main, we now need a service here, and we're going to say service there, and we're going to say service here, and then we're going to say front end service. And this doesn't have any arguments right now. So now arguments, it does not conform to that. Oh yeah, okay. Well, let's come into the service, sorry. And this now needs to implement, this. And do that there. And so now we're seeing what's actually going on, all right? And we just need a button clicks. We need to change this to that. There we go. So remember, this is very abstract, but now the service, it started to use protocols. The view model said, okay, I just want to know about a protocol here. So the implementation for the service with regards to the view model is of no relevance. It just needs to know, I need this one service protocol. So you could start removing this now to become generics, okay? And here we can say T, and it wants to have front-end service. So the T wants to be front-end service protocol. And this is where you can start using type aliases, and we can then say service is equal to T, and then we can change this to service, we can change this to service, and so on. And when we come back to here, see where the problems start to arise, all right? And this is why you should test these things. Now you see reference to generic type view model requires this. So now the view starts knowing about generics, and you're like, no, we don't want that. We don't want that at all. We want the view to be as dumb as possible. And when the view starts getting intelligence, that's when you have to start scrolling back things, all right? Scroll this stuff back, okay? And don't let your application, don't let your view start controlling what your view models and what your services should do, okay? So this is why it should not happen like that. So, but can we fix this? So the view model should, the front end view should not know about the implementation. So this is where we could start saying the view model could have a protocol, right? So let's now come here and make this even more horrible, naming here. And this is going to say, and what do we need? We need add item, right? So when we come to the view model, the only thing the view needs to know about really is get color, get string, all right? And possibly this one. Okay, so we can now come back over to the view and say, all right, fine. Your view model, if I spell it right, your view model must implement this. And we come to here and we say this, and your view model, and boom, look, see, everything's fine here. And the view doesn't know about associated types and so on. It now just knows about this. We come to the application. You'll see all the instantiation here. This file is allowed to know about the implementations. Generic struct requires that conforms to that. Okay, we haven't forced it to conform to it yet. So we come here and we now have the view model conform to it. We come back to our main file. Main files are allowed to know about implementations, not problem, because this service could be passed to multiple views, multiple view models, and so. Or sorry, this service could be passed to multiple view models and only have one instance of it, but there could be lots of individual different view models. So let's now remove the down of levels. So this is then low. This is then high level. Okay, it's then high level because it's as close to the user interaction as possible. This service is middle level. Okay, now we need to know then low level here, and the low level is where the likes of the stores are going to come into to form. Okay, and so let's go into the service, and we now we are saying add item. So at the moment we said get default item. Well, add item, we need to say to the likes of a store, and here we're going to say then new item is equal to self store dot get new, or it should say create item here in this one store, and this is what should happen. So we can start writing a protocol for what our front end service actually requires. So front end store now, and let's say protocol. And the only thing that really our view needs to know about is like create item, and it's going to say create item. And this is now where it gets tricky. Do we use associated types for this? Do we use concrete types for this? Do we use protocol types for this? Well, we know that we need to implement a front-end DTO. Okay, so let's start coming to describe what this is. Front-end view protocol, or we're going to call this front-end entity protocol, right? And this has these two elements in it, okay? And so we have to change this to var. And these are only going to be getters as well, and so on. So now we have the var in the title. So this is what we want it to have. Okay, let's come back to our service. So really, we are going to send back a front end protocol here. Okay, and this is what we're going to have here. Okay. Now, in order to send a new item, we need to know that front-end view DTO implements that. Well, we can, by extension, we can do this now, and we can say front-end view DTO implements front-end entity protocol. We don't need to do anything else than that because it already does, which means now we can return a front-end view DTO, and the title is going to be then new title, and then title here, and then new item is then color, all right? And it doesn't have a store at the moment, which is no problem. But as you can see here now, we now know that front-end view DTO, well, it doesn't technically actually have to create to implement this, you see, because we've now, between our service and our store, we've now got this bridge, because the store sends back the information that we need and our DTO implements that, but we don't need to tell the view that it happens. Okay, we could literally just send this back and create it how we want, because this front-end service, that's what it is, the source of truth for the view models and so on, and it's the one that owns these DTOs, these front-end view DTOs. It owns these. The store owns something different. The store owns the implementation to the front-end entity protocol, all right? But this is where we convert the two. And so this is where we go from here. So now we need to implement this store protocol and come here and create a file. Front end store, and we come to this, and we should be using classes for this, but we're not going to, and we're then going to let the Xcode implement it and create one here. So now we want that there. We now want this one like this, but we now need some form of entity, right? And we're going to say front-end entity, and this is then going to implement front-end entity protocol, and it's going to have a title, and it's going to have then a color, and so on, and it's also going to have an ID, all right, because from the database it's definitely going to have an ID. So we can return this, and we can return a front-end entity, and we'll just say the ID is 1, title is then new item, and then the color is then black. All right, so we now have the implementation to this. So let's come over to our main. Let's now generate the store and front-end store and so on. Now the front-end service needs to have this store, so we come over to this, and we can see it doesn't have one as of yet. So we'll say private var store and front-end store protocol. We'll start this here, and now everything starts to work fine again. So when we come to the main and we run this, we still get button got clicked. Okay, so everything was perfectly fine. All right, we now know what things need to know what. The front-end view knows about a protocol. That's perfectly fine. It's using generics for this. It's saying, hey, I'm a view. I need to have this view model here, and this is the information that I want to output and so on. When the button got clicked, I want to do this. All right, and it went to the view model. The view model is also pretty dumb. Okay, now what we are able to do here is we don't have to necessarily add the service to this. All right, we could extract the service to be generics, but in all fairness, this one struct belongs to this one front-end view, and adding generics to this or not, I don't think it adds or removes anything whatsoever. And you could argue this as well, but there's no really reason. There's only one front-end view model, and when there's one front-end view, there's one front-end view model. Now, the service, on the other hand, there's only going to be one of these, and so you don't really need generics for this either. unless it starts having some multiple uses over different features and so on, then yes, you might need generics here. But really, there's no need for generics in this. It's only really when you start getting to stores where you start thinking, wait a minute, I might need some generics in this. Now, it could be that the store is talking to, say, like a database, or it's talking to a file system, and the database and the file system, it only really cares about how to save entities, and it wants to say about how to list them or index them or create them or delete them, and that just really needs to know about like an ID. So this could be the place that the communication between the store and on any further, or this is where the likes of associated types and type aliases and so on start kicking in, when you start needing to only use specific properties of specific concrete types. Okay, so this ID, when things start having IDs, this is where you should start thinking about using the likes of identifiable. When you need to start having entities that conform to the likes of codable and so on, or equatable. This really is where you need to start thinking about these things. Okay, but at a view level, a view should be as dumb as possible. It should not be comparing stuff. That's what the likes of a possible view model and service should be doing. They should be comparing things. They should be doing the business logic of the view. The view should not know anything. It should just know about presentation, and this is what the render thing should know about presentation. Okay, how is it supposed to look, and what the data it's supposed to display all comes from the view model. So generics can play a role at the view level, okay, but in its simplest form. Okay, associated types, please try to not use associated types at a view level. You can use generics at a view level, but as you can see here, there's no associated types in there. When you come to a view model, a service level, I would try not to use associated types here either. But at like a store level, that's definitely where you could start thinking about using associated types here, okay, for creating things and stuff like that. But this really project specific. So I hope I've managed to help you a little bit in this. Now, this isn't necessarily, we're not necessarily talking about MVVM here or Viper or whatever. The whole point is for you to know at what different level how you're going to create services. You're going to create view models, you're going to create views, or you're going to create environment objects or observable objects, or you name it. But the difference between a junior developer and like a senior developer is architecture. All right, a senior developer understands architecture a lot more and understands how to keep the changes to a minimal. Now, if we decide that we want to change the types or the implementations at front end store level here, we just change it as store, and we're going to have to update one thing. Now, if you had associated types, if you had protocols coming from the store and they went all the way down to the front end view, you would have to end up changing the view models, the view. We don't know how many view models you would have had to change, because the services would have received that store, and you'd have had to change however many. This is the thing. If you change the entity in a store, which is going to happen often because you always add properties to databases, or you remove properties from databases, or you put it into another table and you have different relationships between it. That should all happen at a store level, and let that business logic stay in it. And when a service receives it, the service should just be like taking it, receiving it, and passing it on. Just like we saw in here. Add item, it said, hey store, give me a new item. I convert it to a DTO and send it on even further. This, if there's any other business logic to be done with inside of this, it's maybe too much, right? A service is this connection, this bridge between the store and the view model. All right, and it's really as much as it needs to do, but this is the place where the concrete type kicks in. Okay, and this is where you start passing the likes of the concrete type through a DTO to a view model, and then the view model takes that DTO, right, and is the one that converts it to the different individual properties. Okay, and as you can see here, we did it with getters and stuff, but there's other ways and means of getting around this. With that said, thank you very much for watching. I hope you've got something out of this one video. I hope you've learned this. I hope you've learned from this one video. And if you haven't, then please watch it again. Otherwise, I'm more than happy to make a continuation from this one video. But as you can see now, you've learned the Swift programming language, and now you're learning how to use it. And this is the usability, and it's more about architecture level that you need to understand. If you can start thinking at an architecture level rather than a small clicking buttons, what a label says, it's where your code is created, how your code is created, the naming conventions of your code, where the protocols are stored, in which frameworks are they, which repositories are they, which packages are they, and so on. And what's the best type of coding to use, the best naming conventions to use, the best external packages, the external dependencies to use, and so on. And when is it best to support this iOS version, that macOS version? These are all architectural things that you have to understand. Don't think granular. Think at a macro level first of all, because the more you can think at a macro level, the better it will be to implement these granular changes all the time. And you want as minimal side effects as possible. When you change macro ideas, you should have minimal micro changes to your application, okay? And if you have implemented it correctly, you should only have to tweak and turn and change small areas that have actually got affected by your macro changes, okay? So thank you very much for watching. If you do have any comments, feedback, concerns, or queries, as always, let's start a conversation in the comment section down below. Like, subscribe, share, social networking things, all the normal stuff I say. Please don't forget to do that. Remember, these videos are for you. If you didn't understand it, watch it again, ask the questions, or ask other people, you know, what their thoughts were and how they do it. These videos are for you. They're not for me. I have the experience, I have the knowledge, I can sit down, I can do competency tests and so on, and I can sit at a higher level and explain to people why they should or shouldn't do things. And that's what I'm trying to pass on to you, is to think macro level and understand the micro level as well in detail. Thank you very much for watching. See you in the next video. Ciao, ciao, and goodbye.